Welcome to the plasma body and a new understanding of human biology. In part 2, we are going to have a look at the connection between our bone structure and our emotions and how one affects the other and ultimately our health. To put things into perspective, we first have to understand who we are. And we are a soul with a physical body. And the interaction of our soul and the physical body creates our emotions. For our soul to exist on Earth, we need to have a physical structure to house it. And when you have a look at the picture of the brain there, we have the soul, which sits in the middle center of the brain. It's a non-physical dimension. We then have the emotions, which are the different layers surrounding the soul of the brain. And then we also have the outer areas of the brain which control more the physical aspects of our body. So for the soul to exist on Earth, we needed to have housed it in this physical structure, creating the brain and the emotion from the interaction of the soul with the physical structure of our body. So what does this all mean? Essentially, our soul can exist in the universe without any physical structure. But because of the conditions here on Earth, because of the Earth's magnetic gravitational fields, we create the condition of matter. And so for our soul to live on Earth, it needed to create a physical body. This physical body had to be created so that it can receive and process energy to support the emotion and the soul of the life cycle of the human being. Within our body, we have all the different organs and functions which are in some way protected by the skeletal structure. For example, we have our lungs and our heart, which is protected by the rib cage. These are vital organs for the body. As we've shown in the first part, we've got the bone marrow within the center of the bones, which is then protected as well. And then we have our soul and our brain protected by the hard skeleton of the brain. So you can see that the skeleton structure controls or protects vital organs because those organs are needed to ensure the survival of the physical body. Without that, the physical body would not survive, and ultimately the soul would not be able to survive on Earth conditions. Now, the structure of the bone is decided by the emotional part of the brain to guarantee its survival of the emotion and the soul. So what we've had a look at in the body is we do see different glands. We see thyroid glands and we see the glands over the kidneys. Now all these glands in the body are just essentially control functions, sort of remote control of the brain to control those organs. Now the brain has decided these organs are critical, but not that critical, so it allows those organs to serve the function of the brain to control those organs. However, the bone structure is very different. The bone structure, because it is so critical to the survival of the body, the brain takes full control and responsibility for the bones. So every piece of your bone throughout the body is controlled by the emotional part of the brain because it needs to ensure that the physical body can survive. The bone structure throughout your body is controlled by the emotional parts of your brain. So it's very important for the existence and survival of the soul. Now, if the current health system could reevaluate the role of the bones they will see that through the bone structure, he creates our bone marrow, which ultimately creates our blood and the T cells and B cells, which is vital for the immune system and total health of the body. And this bone structure is controlled by the emotional part of the brain. So we need to look at how important our emotional state of health is and how that is affecting certain illnesses and diseases that the body ultimately produces. After the brain, the bone structure is one of the most complicated and one of the most sophisticated systems in the body, because every point, every piece, every position of the bone is tuned, fine-tuned, it's controlled and developed by the brain. And this development is through the gravitational magnetic fields. So just like in our CO2 boxes, we have our two plates, and as we explained in part one, each of the bone structures and the strands create the right environment, the right magnetic gravitational field environment to attract any of the minerals and vitamins which are available on this planet and which the body needs. So the bone structure, as we said, is a nanolayer structure, exactly like we've done with our copper wires and our plates. And we create the certain conditions which ultimately are there to attract, as we say, the carbon from our environment when we create our CO2 box. And so the brain does that as well. The brain controls the bone structure to ensure that the right fields are attracted into the body that the body needs. Now, all of this is controlled by the brain. When we go back, and a lot of people will say that, well, we only really use 5, 10, 15% on the intelligence of our brain, and the rest of the brain we don't use. But if we don't use it, then surely it will rot away. But essentially, the rest of the brain is there to control and constantly monitor every aspect, every point in the structure of the bone, there to ensure that the bone creates the right gravitational magnetic field to attract the right energy, right minerals that the body needs at that point in time. So the whole brain is there to control every structure, every point in our skeleton system, from the tip of our toe to our skull to our ribs, is all controlled by the brain. Every bone structure is essentially a depository bank for the needs of the body, because the bone in a certain point in the body, where the rib cage or whether it's in your leg, is there to design, there to be created, create the right magnetic gravitational field to attract the mineral, the energy that the body needs at that point, so it can deliver it to the body directly. So to reiterate, every structure of the bone, anywhere in the body, the shape, the finger in our bone, is all directly connected by the emotional and controlled by the emotional part of the brain. This explains why when we get old, people become frail, their bones, problems with their bones, become very brittle. This is because at a certain point, the body doesn't want to exist. The emotional part, which controls the physical part through the blood cells, the immune system, has decided that I don't want to live anymore. And so your intentions, your emotions that you express is shown in the physical aspect of your body. And so your body will slowly shut down because that's what you have decided. You don't want to live anymore. And so you see your body slowly degenerating. In the plasma technology, we'll look at the bones in a totally different light. to the current thinking of, well, we've got so many numbers of bones in different shapes and all placed in different areas. When we process the body, we learn how to create different gravitational and magnetic fields within the bone structure, or we learn how we can change the magnetic gravitational fields of our bone structure, which ultimately affects our health through our immune system. So you can see we essentially have direct control over the health of our body, how our body truly functions. And this control is through our emotional state. Through our emotions, we can decide to change our health of our body. Instead of trying to process the body from a physical point of view and trying to look at fixing certain aspects of the physical body, it would be far easier to look at the emotional aspects to see how the emotion is changing, is affecting the structure of our bones, which ultimately affects our total immune system of our body. And so it's a totally different approach. We've all known how emotions, know that emotions do affect our health. We all go through ups and downs, and we see our health deteriorate at certain times. But now we can see how it is totally related to, in most parts, the structure of our bone and how that impacts. And this happens over time. Changing is affecting the structure of our bones, which ultimately affects our total immune system of our body. And so it's a totally different approach. We've all known how emotions, know that emotions do affect our health. We all go through ups and downs, and we see our health deteriorate at certain times. But now we can see how it is totally related to, in most parts, the structure of our bone and how that impacts. And this happens over time. It's not an immediate effect. So when we come back to our cycle that we've shown in the first part, where when we eat foods, it goes through the digestion process, and then from the intestines, the fields go into the lymph system, and then from there, the bone structure creates the right magnetic gravitational field strength to attract the certain fields from the lymph that it needs. This goes into your bone marrow, which produces your blood, your T cells, B cells, which then supplies us to the rest of the body. Now, in the first part, we showed you how the bone structure is different gravitational magnetic fields there to attract the certain fields that the body needs. Now we can see how the emotional part of our brain is the one which controls the structure, and how the emotion is so important. Our way of life and our outlook in life is so important to the overall health of our body. In part 3, we'll go through some very practical applications that one can do, and knowing and understanding how the emotional aspect of our brain and our life affects our physical bone structure and ultimately our health. You can see there are very simple things that we can do to improve our overall health of our body.